Now, I know my channel is typically dedicated to professional wrestling, but you will not be getting any talks of professional wrestling in this video. If you came to this video looking for said talk because you're a regular viewer of my channel, I'm sorry. Don't have that for you here. We're going to go into the realm of 80s cartoons, and specifically a reaction to a new cartoon that's coming out next year. And in case for those of you who don't know, a lot of you who followed me for years probably do, I'm a fan of 80s cartoons. Quite honestly, I'm a fan of 80s pop culture in general. It's the best decade ever. I love the 80s. Great stuff. And there's a reason why I love Stranger Things and the It remake that just came out. And I love 80s shit. Thor Ragnarok, 80s as hell. I loved it. But yeah, this video is in a direct response to a trailer that Cartoon Network dropped for a new animated series that they're going to be doing in 2019, currently in development. Thundercats Roar, the latest attempt at a reboot of the Thundercats franchise. I felt compelled to say something because it's part of a continuing trend with 80s cartoons that I grew up with getting rebooted. You know, there have been talks of a He-Man and the Masters of the Universe movie coming out with David Goyer writing the screenplay. She-Ra's getting rebooted on Netflix. Voltron's already been rebooted on Netflix. Ninja Turtles, they just wrapped up their newest show, and now they're doing a new show that a trailer for that dropped a few days before Thundercats Roar. The reaction to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles trailer before Thundercats Roar and after Thundercats Roar has been amazing, because I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's just this constant theme. 80s cartoons keep coming back. You know, the Michael Bay Transformers movies, those are obviously part of that discussion as well. And now we get Thundercats Roar, and this is the point where I'm just going to throw my hands up and say, all right, I got to say something. I got to speak about this, because I feel like my childhood is under assault. And like, somebody in the entertainment industry hates me specifically and is trying to bring back everything that I loved as a kid and just trying to ruin it for some goddamn reason. I don't know why. And I waited a few days before I commented on it, because after that trailer dropped, there were videos and tweets going out all over the place. People have just been voicing their displeasure with this cartoon, and rightfully so. It looks awful. It looks absolutely awful. But I wanted to wait a few days before I commented on it, because I didn't want it to just be me turning on the camera and going, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, and then shut the camera off and let it go. That may have been entertaining for some people, but I wanted to make sure I was like, you know, cooler heads prevailed. Let a calmer, gentler me come on here and discuss why I'm not happy with it, and why it's kind of disheartening to see some of these properties that I grew up with get treated the way they do sometimes. Now, that's not to say that all of them are terrible. I already mentioned Voltron on Netflix. I think that one's really good. I think that one's been handled really, really well. I'm not saying it's perfect. I think Keith is an asshole. I can't stand him, but, you know, Shiro for life. But I think the show's pretty good, and it's a faithful adaptation while adding new elements to give it its own identity, and I think it works as its own show. And She-Ra, we haven't seen much of anything yet, so there's not a whole lot to really comment on. I don't really have anything to say. I have a bunch of questions that I've been asking, and people have accused me of being a sexist for asking these questions, but what I want to know is like, okay, how can you do a She-Ra show without doing a He-Man show first? Because He-Man's supposed to give her the sword, and does she start off as a bad guy first? Because She-Ra's story is one of tragedy and redemption, and that's a big part of the character, and one that I felt Filmation really didn't explore enough in the original show, and one that they could do some great stuff with. And I like the comics, the recent Masters of the Universe comics, I thought did a great job of expanding on She-Ra and making her an even more interesting character, as well as some other characters tied into that. But asking those questions has gotten me labeled a sexist, and it's just another one of those things where it's like the Ghostbusters reboot, the 2016 thing, where it's like, oh, if you don't like it, you don't like women. Sorry. If you don't like Wonder Woman, you don't like women. It's like, okay, I thought Wonder Woman was pretty good. I enjoyed that movie. I mean, I'm going to hold it to the same standard as I do anything else, though. It is like, look, She-Ra is a property that I grew up watching as a kid. I have some questions. I'm going to watch it just out of sheer, like, loyalty to the brand, if nothing else. I have some questions, and I would like to have them, you know, answered. And as a fan, there are certain expectations when it comes to those properties. And if I don't feel they're being done justice, it's not going to be good for me. And I realize with these properties, and a lot of them, especially in the case of like He-Man and Masters of the Universe and Thundercats, not so much with Transformers and Ninja Turtles, where those things kind of transcended the 80s and became their own everlasting brands, kind of like on par with like a Batman or a Spider-Man, DC and Marvel, that kind of stuff. Thundercats and He-Man are thought of largely as 80s properties. She-Ra, same thing, 80s property. A lot of the shows I liked never really weren't even that big a hit in the 80s. I just really liked them. Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future, loved that show. It was Terminator for kids. I loved it. It was great. It was basically they took like the future timeline of the Terminator movies and made it into a kid show. It was amazing. I loved it. And it was like, God, it was like so intense for a kid show anyway. I loved it. It was great, but it wasn't a big hit. It only lasted one season, but I have fond memories of it. Dino Riders was one that I really liked. It wasn't a big hit. It was basically G.I. Joe, except instead of like army vehicles, they ride dinosaurs. Sounds amazing. Don't know why it wasn't a hit. The cartoon show wasn't that great, and I think that might have been where the problem was, because the toys were awesome. The toys were amazing, but it's one of my favorite toy lines from the 80s, but it was really like the show itself wasn't that great, so I think maybe that was the problem. And Inhumanoids, huge favorite of mine. Only lasted 13 episodes, didn't last that long, but I will remember Decompose for the rest of my life. That show was metal as fuck, and I loved it. But there's so many things from my childhood that I have a special attachment to, and if I feel they're not being done justice, I'm going to be upset, and a lot of other fans are going to feel upset, and they're going to instantly shit on that thing. Now, again, I understand that there's an evolution with these things, and you have to offer something different, because if you just redo what you did in the 80s, what's the point? Like, why? I'll just go back and watch the old show. So I want to feel like I'm getting a new experience, and that's where I felt like the 2011 Thundercats reboot really did it right, where, I'm no purist by any stretch of the imagination. The 2011 show, if I was looking at it through the eyes of a Thundercat purist, I would have fucking hated it, because they changed a lot in that show. I mean, Tigra is basically a completely different character, but I would argue they improved Tigra as a character in that show. They told a different story, they had a different visual style, and it was a little bit darker, and it was good. It was very good, and I wish it had lasted longer. When I listened to Dan Norton's podcast, where he explained what he wanted to do with season 2, I was like, man, why can't I have nice things? Because that would have been great. Like, almost everything he described and what their plan was and what he wanted to do sounded amazing. He probably, if they had done everything that they wanted to do, probably would have gotten me to cry over Rover Bill. No Thundercats fan has ever said that before, I guarantee you, but it might have happened. And Slythe probably would have been my favorite character. Slythe was one of my favorite characters on the original show, but it would have been a completely different level of appreciation here. But that was how you do a reboot right. You offer something different, and but it feels true. It feels in the spirit, and I'm willing to go along with the changes. I'm willing to go along on the journey as long as I feel like the property is being done justice. And I think that's one of the reasons Transformers was able to transcend the 80s, and Ninja Turtles as well, is because Ninja Turtles was always reinventing itself and coming out with new shows and making movies and all sorts of other things. And Transformers, it felt like once Beast Wars happened, like Transformers, that was it. It became like this everlasting thing that was never going to go away. Beast Wars, radically different show from G1. It technically takes place in the G1 timeline, but it feels like Transformers. It feels like it belongs, and there was a clear appreciation for the lore of Transformers, especially when you get into season 2, and they get on board the Ark and all the mark out moments that stem from that. But I was willing to go along with the changes and the differences between Beast Wars and G1, because Beast Wars was legitimately a good show. I even gave a pass to Beast Machines, which I know a lot of fans hate Beast Machines, and rightfully so. I completely get it. I understand why, but I liked a lot of the things that they tried to do. Yes, the Maximal character designs are hideous. I'm not saying that they're not, but There's a lot of strong themes on that show, and you know what? They took some risks, they tried something different, and there were some things on that show I really liked. It's just not all of it clicked, and if you're a Transformers fan, there are some pretty big pills to swallow. But you know what? It took risks, and I can respect that. And I know the creator of the show got like a lot of heat back in the day, and I was like, nah, man. It's like, dude, he tried something different, and like I said, some of it worked, some of it didn't, and they did tie in a lot of Transformers lore as well, and use them in new ways, like the key to Vector Sigma came back, and the plasma energy chamber came back, and they used them in ways that fit the story that they were trying to tell. All of that's fine. You know, there's a lot of things in the show that I did enjoy, despite some obvious stylistic problems and character design problems and some character development problems. But again, those were some of the risks they took, and it didn't always work. So, but anyway, you know, I'm not looking to hate these reboots. That's the other thing. But when I see what we're getting, I'm just not happy, and it makes my inner child, you know, just very upset, because it's like, I know what these things should be. I know how they feel like they should be, and that's not what we're getting. And, you know, I look back at the Michael Bay Transformers films, which I enjoyed the first movie. Again, has a lot of problems, and had I known when it was going to start, I would have never supported it. But I was like, you know what? As a fan, it made me happy and gave me some things to enjoy. Yes, there's some annoying things about it. Yes, it's not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination, but it gave me the right amount of like nostalgia and fun, and I was able to enjoy it for what it was. The sequels got increasingly worse. And at first they were funny bad, and I was able to enjoy them for being funny bad. And then when you get around to Age of Extinction and the Dinobots show up, I'm like, okay, guys, we've had our fun, but it's over now, and it needs to stop. And it's at a point where I feel like they have, those movies have no appreciation for Transformers lore and have no appreciation for trying to do it right or trying to do it justice. It's just, they're shelving them out there just to make money. Fortunately, it seems like that's finally coming to an end. You know, Ninja Turtles, this new one. And Ninja Turtles, it's hard to get upset about because they've done fairly well with TV shows. The original one is a classic that I grew up loving. The Saban show was bad, but at least it kept the core of like an action-adventure show. Like, the basic core concept was correct. It was just a really bad idea and a really bad show. But at least it was like, it didn't feel un-Ninja Turtles-like, if that makes any sense. I think going to live action was probably a huge mistake. Introducing a fifth turtle, and no, I don't care if the fifth turtle's a female. You're just mucking up the waters. Like, nope, there's always four. There's always going to be four. Don't muck it up. Look, Venus de Milo, yes, you introduced a turtle with tits. I don't know why you felt the need to do this, but that always freaked me out. It's like, wait, how can a non-mammal have mammary glands? How does that work exactly? I don't know. Anyway, I was a weird kid. I fixated on the weirdest shit. But anyway, that show, at least it felt like a Ninja Turtle show. It was just a really bad one. But then you got the 2003 show, which I thought was really good for the most part. And then you got this new show that was on Nickelodeon, the 3D animated show, which I wasn't a fan of the visual style of at first. I looked at the trailer, I'm like, I don't like the way that looks. But then I watched it, I'm like, you know what? It's funny, it's cute, it's charming, kids will love it. It's got some legitimate drama to it. There's a lot of great callbacks and references and reimagining of old characters. You know what? I like it. I dig this. And they were on a quest to reference every horror movie ever made, and I love them for that. It's like, oh god, it's a Friday the 13th parody. And I'm like, oh god, it's a reference to Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm like, oh my god. And they just went through, like, the entire time they were on the farm, especially, it was like, oh my god, they're going to reference every horror movie ever made. It's going to be great. There's a lot of stuff to enjoy about the Nickelodeon show. And now this new one that they're doing, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I don't like the animation style. It looks very cutified. You know, doesn't look very good. Again, I was wrong about the last one, so maybe I'll be wrong here, but it just doesn't look that great. Not a fan of the way it looks. Like, I keep harping on the way it looks. I don't like that Raphael doesn't have size anymore, because what the fuck? I'll circle back to that, but John Cena's voicing the villain, which I guess is the closest we'll ever get to a John Cena heel turn, but there was nothing in that trailer that gave me hope. It just looked like a really bad, dumbed down, jokey version of the Ninja Turtles. And Ninja Turtles have always had humor in it, from the animated show to the movies and every other version of the animated show. But there comes a point where you joke around too much and the whole action adventure element kind of gets thrown out the window, and it's impossible to take it seriously because it doesn't feel like it has any stakes. And I felt like this last Ninja Turtle show had some legitimately good drama in it. Again, I'm not saying everything they did was perfect, and yes, it was very much a kid's show, but I thought, it's like, whenever I watched it, I was like, man, if I were 10 years old, I'd love this show. This would be like my favorite show. It's great. It feels like Ninja Turtles, but it's not a copy of the Ninja Turtles that I grew up with. It's fantastic. And I think that's part of the thing. You want to feel like if you're ever bringing back one of these old properties, you want to feel like it's building off of what came before, not just redoing everything, point by point, which I guess is one of the defenses of She-Ra. It's like, all right, it's not including He-Man. It's, apparently, again, I'll have to wait and see the show before I decide. She-Ra's not going to start off as a bad guy working for the Horde, but maybe that's one of those things I just want it to be too much like it was, and maybe they have an idea that's just as good or better, and they can just tell that story. So who knows? We'll see. I do love me some Masters of the Universe and that whole franchise, so I'm willing to check it out. But, and I guess that's really the problem, because then I turn around and I see, like, Rise of the Ninja Turtles, and then I see things like Thundercats Roar, which I guess 15 minutes into this video, I'm finally getting into the trailer and what's wrong with it. It looks like they took the art style from Steven Universe, or Teen Titans Go, and they just took everything that was great about the old Thundercats and just shat on it and just created this like goofy looking show that's nothing but jokes, has no stakes, no drama, no action adventure, no nothing. It's just stupid looking characters doing stupid shit, and that's all it is, which is pretty much what they did to Teen Titans Go. It's pretty much what they did with even Powerpuff Girls to a degree. Like, as I heard the new Powerpuff Girls was awful. I didn't watch it. I heard they pretty much did the same thing, and I'm like, the original Powerpuff Girls wasn't that serious of a show. Very good. I really enjoyed the old Powerpuff Girls, but that show was part of the humor of that show was that it was so like outwardly girly and frilly and cutesy, but then when you watch it, it gets so violent that it's like, oh my god, this is hilarious. So like, this is just great. And apparently the new one is bad from what I've heard, but apparently this style is becoming more and more of a thing. I guess you could say it started with Adventure Time and shows like that, but you look at Adventure Time, and Adventure Time, because I don't want to sound like I'm shitting on like that sillier style or wackier shows, because there were shows I watched when I was a kid that were just purely for the laughs. Ren and Stimpy would probably be my ideal example, although that's a bit harsher than most kids are used to today. But Ren and Stimpy was a show, it's like, look, that show has no drama, no stakes, no nothing. It's just jokes, and I'm in it purely for the jokes. As dark as some of those jokes were, but it's, it's kind of the same thing. I understand liking things that are a little sillier and a little goofier and doesn't take everything so seriously, but Adventure Time does have a really well thought out lore and has a really well thought out backstory, and at least the Lich is scary. I mean, I look at the Lich and I'm like, oh my god, that thing is terrifying. If I were 5 years old, I'd be pissing my pants. Because to make the Thundercats comparison, well, I guess I'll come back to that, but, you look at something like Steven Universe, which I only watched once. Seemed cute, seemed funny. I don't really have an opinion of it, beyond the effect it's having on my shows, but it's, that show seemed to have a really well thought out lore and a backstory and everything, and it works for the people that enjoy it, and they give them something to care about. This feels like they're taking something that I watched as a kid, and they're trying to fit it into the mold of one of those shows, and it doesn't really work, because it just feels like a complete betrayal of what Thundercats used to be, and it's really weird to me that the cheesy 80s cartoon feels 10 times more badass than the goofy looking shit that I'm seeing out of Thundercats Roar, because my sister made a great comment. She was like, oh my god, these character designs are terrible. The Thundercats don't even look like cats. They look like goblins. And I'm like, yeah, she's not wrong. I mean, if you looked at, aside from Chitara's spots and Tigra's stripes, would you be able to discern any cat-like qualities out of those Thundercat designs? No. And that was what made the original design so great. They looked like humanoid cat people, and they looked amazing. You know, those designs were like one of a kind. Is like, who is the genius that thought these up? Because these are amazing, and they thought a lot into the lore, the backstory, and creating stakes and drama that'll appeal to, you know, 5 to 7-year-olds. And for that, it worked great. I'm not saying that the original Thundercats wasn't cheesy at times, that it wasn't silly at times. It absolutely was. But I'm telling you from the point of view of like a 5-year-old who watched the show back in the day, Mum-Ra, and this is where I'm going to tie back into the Lich, Mum-Ra legitimately scared me as a child. When I first watched the show, he legitimately scared me when I was 5 years old. And as I grew up, I look at that design, the red cloak and the face and the bandages hanging everywhere, and I looked at it and I'm like, oh my God, that's Boris Karloff as the mummy. That's where they got that design. There are close-ups of Mum-Ra's face that are lifted right from the original Universal Mummy, which I'm pointing to my DVD rack over there, which actually I've moved it over there, so you can't see it, but fuck it, whatever. And they worked really hard on those character designs and really making Mum-Ra in particular looking as scary as possible, and making Lion-O and Panthro and Chitara and Tigra and all the Thundercats looking as cool as possible. And then you look at that intro, it's the most like adrenaline-driven thing I've ever seen in my life. How can you not get pumped up to watch the show after watching that intro? It's there's nothing quite like it. It's one of the greatest intros in the history of television, and not just animation, television. It's that good. Love it. And you would think in 30 years that we would get something better, and this is where I'm going to make a comparison to Batman. When I was really, really young, I grew up on Adam West Batman and like the Filmation Batman cartoons, the Super Friend cartoons, and those type of things. And they were sillier, right? And, you know, lower quality animation for the cartoons, and they were what they were, and they worked in the eras that they were made in, but then I got a little bit older, and 6 and 7 years old, and I saw the Tim Burton Batman, and that completely blew my mind. I'm like, I had no idea that Batman could be like this in any kind of, you know, adaptive medium. I had no idea that they could take the Batman comics and turn it into this. And then I distinctly remember the first time I saw a preview for Batman the Animated Series, and my jaw fucking dropped, because I was like, this looks unlike any other cartoon I've ever seen before. This looks amazing. And to this day, Batman the Animated Series is my definitive version of Batman, and probably my favorite animated show of all time, besides like The Simpsons in their golden age or something like that. So I hold that show in very high regard. And you would think that, you know, you look at, you start with the Adam West Batman, then you just kind of evolve up to that point, and there's an evolution process. And I'm not saying that I look down on the Adam West Batman. I love Adam West. I love, you know, rest in peace. God rest your soul. You were the first pop culture Batman. I mean, I have a lot of like love and respect for the Adam West Batman, but it needed to evolve past that to get to where we were with Batman the Animated Series. And you know, I expect changes. I expect an evolution. I expect things to be different. It doesn't work if I feel like we're regressing, and that's where Thundercats Roar screws up. It feels like a regression, because you don't get the action adventure, you don't get you know, the high stakes drama or anything like that. You don't get the scary villain. You don't get anything, because Mum-Ra, and this is where the 2011 show kind of failed a little bit, and maybe the 80s version was just too good and you couldn't top it, but Mum-Ra wasn't quite as scary in the 2011 version. It was like, dude, you could have made him like 10 times darker, especially since this show seemed to be geared more towards adults anyway. It's like you could have made him like a friggin' just completely demonic and just go to the nth degree with it. But yeah, and that's my big problem with Thundercats Roar. It feels like a giant regression of something that was made 30 years ago. I'm like, how can you not top the older show? It's like, how does that happen? You know? Because the 2011 show absolutely felt like an evolution, made with love and respect for the original, but also trying to do its own thing and be different and improve in certain areas and just build off of the foundation that the 80s show left behind. And that worked, and it's a crying shame that reboot wasn't allowed to survive, but them's the breaks. And Thundercats Roar, you know, it just looks like a cookie cutter show that looks like every other show on Cartoon Network. And I'm not saying I don't like some of the other, like, I don't know, cutesy shows that are out there now, that cutesy style that people seem to be hating on these days, is like, I've only watched The Amazing World of Gumball once, but I think the visual style of it looks amazing because they blended in so many different things. It's like, look, I can't really speak to the show as a whole because I've barely seen any of it, but it looks impressive. Like, I was like, wow, that actually looks like something that has a really unique style and is distinctive from everything else that's on the channel. Teen Titans Go looks like cookie cutter bullshit. Adventure Time works really well, has its own really well thought out lore, and I don't question why that show is as popular as it is. Teen Titans Go, I do. I was like, I don't get the appeal here, but maybe kids today are just dumb. I don't know, but it's Gravity Falls, to bring Disney into it. I thought Gravity Falls was really friggin' good. Of course, I liked it because it's kind of dark and fucked up, but it's, it's kind of like, I talked about Captain Power being Terminator for kids. This kind of feels like X-Files for kids in a way, that show. So I really liked Gravity Falls. So there is good animation out there. I just don't want the stuff that I like to be adapted and co-opted and turned into something that it's not, or something that it doesn't work being. And Thundercats clearly does not work in this style, in this format, in this way. And I want to believe that there was no malicious intent behind this. I know a lot of the more political people are, accusing them of, because everything has to be political today, because Jesus Christ, I can't even, football's been political, and just everything is just a mess. Can I go one fucking day without having somebody complain about Trump, about something? It's just every day, every fucking day. And I'm not saying that the complaints aren't valid. I'm just saying it's just, God damn, that it's just every day. And it's just insanity. It's just constant in everything, in every fucking thing. Like in the world of entertainment, there has to be some kind of complaint or some kind of message being sent. It's like, God damn, it's Thundercats. So I don't know, I want to assume that there's no malicious intent here, but when I hear one side going, it's like, oh, it's attack against manhood and masculinity, and they're accusing the creators of being against what they call toxic masculinity, and they want to drive down manhood and take away anything manly or heroic, and the other side are saying, oh, they're just a bunch of racists and sexist or whatever. I don't know how I can be sexist or racist hating on a Thundercats show, but hey, whatever. I don't know anymore. Goddamn, man. Apparently hating a Ghostbusters movie made me a sexist, so who knows in this day and age anymore. Sneezing the wrong way could make me a sexist, who knows. But it's just a shit show right now, but I mean, if that was the intent, to kind of get rid of things that are manly and masculine and quote-unquote toxic, I'm like, what the fuck was toxic about the old Thundercats? What? Heroism, bravery, selfless sacrifice, teamwork, survival on an alien world, the code of Thundera, truth, justice, honor, loyalty. My God, it's just, what is toxic about that? And, basic morality, I mean, when I watch shows like He-Man and Thundercats, I learned, I got some good life lessons out of it, and that helped shape my morality a little bit. I tried to learn things from the shows that I watched as a kid. Optimus Prime was a big role model to me. Lion-O taught me a lot about growing up, because in one of the brilliant moves from the original show, he's basically a 12-year-old in the body of an adult. And so he's basically just this giant man-child that has to learn and grow throughout the entire series. And the Lion-O that you get in the first episode is not the same character that's in episode 130. He's completely developed and changed throughout the course of the show. And all of that is really good and powerful. And I learned things from watching He-Man. Yeah, He-Man is toxic masculine hero stuff. He's like a big Boy Scout. Come on. He's, sometimes they use nonviolent resistance to solve problems. I can recall cases where they read books to solve problems. It's all sorts of crazy shit. They have strong female heroes on the show, so I don't understand, Tila, Chitara, the Sorceress, Queen Marlena turns out to be an awesome character when you watch The Rainbow Warrior, that classic episode of He-Man. There's a lot of good stuff in those shows, and I don't see anything toxic about them. So if your goal was to kind of bring it down, make fun of it, and just stomp out any heroism or masculinity in it, I'm like, I don't know why you would do that. I got some good values out of that show, but whatever the case, the show looks like a fucking disaster waiting to happen. Huge misfire by Cartoon Network, and it's coming out in 2019, so we've got a long time to wait until it actually shows up. I have no desire to watch it. Just my personal opinion, but I don't think it's going to stop the trend of like 80s cartoons getting poor reboots, because like I said, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is getting, supposedly, I mean, I've been hearing about a He-Man movie since 2002, and it's just, I'll believe it when I see it, but even if it does happen, I'm not going to be excited for it, because I know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to make something that's going to try and fit into the mold of the Marvel Universe, because that's where movies keep screwing up, because it's like, oh, we got to do a cinematic universe that's quippy as hell. We got to do a cinematic universe that's quippy as hell, that has continuity between all these 14 fucking different things, and they're going to spend half the movie setting up a bunch of shit like She-Ra, the Horde, the Snake Men, Keldor is Skeletor. They may even work in like DC heroes in there, because DC and Masters of the Universe crossed over in the comics, bunch of other shit, and it's going to end with a post-credit scene that teases a She-Ra movie that'll never happen because this movie will be so bad. It's yeah, it's just look, entertainment industry, just stop fucking up the things that I like. I would rather these things fade into obscurity than have them get destroyed. That's just my take. I don't know. Again, I'm not assuming there's anything malicious behind this. I just think that just huge misfires, and they're putting the wrong people in charge of these products and projects, I should say. And I mean, I wouldn't know. Like, if I were put in charge, I'm no genius by any stretch of the imagination. If I were put in charge of He-Man, if I were put in charge of Thundercats, I would probably be too attached to it to want to take any risks. I think that was part of the problem with the 2002 He-Man show, is like the guys involved were clearly big fans, but were a little too involved and maybe a little too attached. And like, guys, did we really need a backstory for Cyclone? Was that really something we needed? Come on, chew the fat, get to the point. And I mean, I enjoyed the show for what it was, but I felt like it got a little too deep into the lore sometimes. But it's, you know, it's, yeah, I feel like a return for any of these shows should feel like an evolution or a step forward, and that's not what we're getting here. And that's not what we're getting from a lot of the things, like Rise of the Ninja Turtles, like, we'll see with She-Ra. I don't know. I literally know nothing except that they're making it, and I've seen one picture. That's it. So who the hell knows how that's going to turn out? But like I said, the people, well, DreamWorks is making it, and they made Voltron, and Voltron turned out fairly well. So fingers crossed. We'll see. But I will, however, make this recommendation. If you are starved, if you're a Thundercats fan who's upset over how the show's being treated, I'm going to make a recommendation to you. If you have not picked up the He-Man Thundercats crossover comic, I have the trade paperback. If you haven't read this yet, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely worth checking out. I mean, if you're a fan of both the old cartoons, it feels like, for the most part, it came right out of the cartoon shows. Just really, really good stuff. And it's a delight to see these characters cross over, because I think for a lot of us, that was kind of the crossover us 80s cartoon fans always wanted. I mean, you see things like Lion-O and the Thundercats on the same panel as like friggin' Skeletor. I mean, the same splash page as Skeletor. I mean, that's amazing, and that's some really good stuff. So yeah, I highly recommend picking up that comic if you're a fan of 80s cartoons and those properties in particular. As for the future of Thundercats, my hopes are obviously very, very low for Thundercats War. Now, again, I've been wrong before. I was wrong about the 2012 Ninja Turtles show. I thought that turned out pretty well, but, you know, my hopes aren't high, and I feel like that the people involved just wanted to make a silly, goofy show. It almost feels like Warner Brothers was like, hey, we've got this IP, could you do something with it? And these guys wanted to make a jokey, funny show, and it's like, we'll just plug Thundercats into it. What's the worst that could happen? You piss off literally every 80s child. That's what happened. But, my God, it's not good. It's not good. Not good. So yeah, I just want to come on here and give my thoughts about rebooting things from my child, and how I'm upset at how a lot of them just get horribly mistreated. And like, because that's the other thing. It's like, dude, I want to like pass these things down to my kids someday. And like, this is not, like, Thundercats Roar doesn't look like something I would be excited to pass down to them. Thundercats I would, like the original show I would. I'd be like, this is what your dad watched, and just watch their eyes light up during that fucking intro, where it's like, if you watch that intro and you're not jazzed up and ready to go wrestle a bear with your bare hands, I don't know what to tell you. That thing is the coolest thing ever. But anyway, I think I've rambled long enough. I'll get off my soapbox now and just let it, whatever happens, happens. But yeah, I guess we'll find out in 2019 how everything turns out. But who knows? I may even have more to say at a later date. But that is all I have for you in this particular video. Thank you all for watching me rant and get all this shit off my chest. Sorry if it bored you. Sorry if it irritated you. Sorry if you didn't get anything out of this but watching me just piss and moan about something silly. But you know, it meant something to me, so I just felt like I had to say something about it. So that is all I have for you now. I've got more videos lined up in the future, so stay tuned for those. But until next time, later, everybody.